the famous moment on June 9th, 1954.
Little did I dream you could be so reckless and so cruel. You've done enough. Have you no sense of decency? At long last, have you no sense of decency?
You could see Joe McCarthy going, what did I do? What did I do?
The fact that McCarthy really didn't seem to have any sense of decency, and the fact that he'd been caught publicly in lies over the course of these 6 weeks, the public's capacity to trust him, the belief that he was engaged in this anti-communist crusade as some sort of earnest attempt to protect American society, as opposed to a demagogic bullying spree. At the end of it, I think all the illusions, the comfortable illusions that McCarthy had cultivated about himself had effectively been dispelled.
It was as if the entire country had been waiting for somebody to finally say this line, "Have you no sense of decency?" to Senator McCarthy. That's the moment where McCarthy incinerates himself on national TV. It's the moment in which the dragon that is Joseph McCarthy is finally slain.
Well, first, I wanted to thank my colleagues for the opportunity to serve as the House Republican Conference Chair. I also want to thank this leadership team. I look forward to working with them in partnership, shoulder to shoulder, to make sure that we are fighting on behalf of hardworking Americans. I also want to thank President Trump for his support. He is a critical part of our Republican team. Liz Cheney, there's absolutely no path for her in elected office ever again.
Our hearings last summer began with an outline of President Trump's multi-part plan to overturn the 2020 presidential election. We then proceeded to demonstrate each of these elements in detail, with more than 20 hours of evidence. The vast weight of evidence presented so far has shown us that the central cause of January 6th was one man, Donald Trump, whom many others followed. None of this would have happened without him. He was personally and substantially involved in all of it. He spurred others to do his bidding. President Trump had a premeditated plan to declare that the election was fraudulent and stolen before Election Day, before he knew the election results. He made his stolen election claims on election night against the advice of his campaign without any evidence in hand. Then, over the next 2 months, he sought to find those who would help him invent and spread lies about the widespread fraud. Many of those who stepped forward to help, including Rudy Giuliani, knew they never had real evidence sufficient to change the election results. And on the evening of January 5th, they admitted they were still trying to find that phantom evidence. Of course, as a result of making intentionally false claims of election fraud, Mr. Giuliani's license to practice law has now been suspended. President Donald Trump was in a unique position, better informed about the absence of widespread election fraud than almost any other American. President Trump's own campaign experts told him that there was no evidence to support his claims. His own Justice Department appointees investigated the election fraud claims and told him point blank they were false. In mid-December 2020, President Trump's senior advisors told him the time had come to concede the election. Donald Trump knew the courts had ruled against him. He had all of this information, but still he made the conscious choice to claim fraudulently that the election was stolen, to pressure state officials to change election results, to manufacture fake electoral slates, to attempt to corrupt our Department of Justice. to summon tens of thousands of supporters to Washington. Knowing that they were angry, knowing that some of them were armed, he sent them to the Capitol. Then, as the riot was underway, he incited his supporters to further violence by publicly condemning his vice president. And then he refused for hours to disband his rioting supporters and instruct them to leave the Capitol, even when he was begged repeatedly to do so. None of this is normal or acceptable or lawful in our republic.
Ms. McGill, at Penn, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment, yes.
I am asking, specifically calling for the genocide of Jews, does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If it is directed and severe or pervasive, it is harassment.
So the answer is yes.
It is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman.
It's a context-dependent decision. That's your testimony today. Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. That is not bullying or harassment. This is the easiest question to answer yes, Ms. McGill. So is your testimony that you will not answer yes?
If it if the
Yes
speech
or no?
becomes if the speech becomes conduct, it can be harassment. Yes.
Conduct meaning committing the act of genocide? The speech is not harassment? This is unacceptable, Ms. McGill. I'm going to give you one more opportunity for the world to see your answer. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's code of conduct when it comes to bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be harassment.
The answer is yes. And Dr. Gay, at Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
What's the context?
Targeted as an individual, targeted at an individual.
It's
severe,
targeted at
pervasive.
Jewish students, Jewish individuals. Do you understand your testimony is dehumanizing them? Do you understand that dehumanization is part of anti-Semitism? I will ask you one more time. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric. When it
And is it
crosses into
anti-Semitic rhetoric?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric, when it crosses into conduct that amounts to bullying, harassment, intimidation, that is actionable conduct, and we do take action.
So the answer is yes, that calling for the genocide of Jews violates Harvard Code of Conduct, correct?
Again, it depends on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign. These are unacceptable answers across the board.
Have you no sense of decency at long last? Have you no sense of decency?
There's a national uproar over anti-Semitism. Somebody like Elise Stefanik has no problem going after Ivy League presidents. What about Donald Trump, who dines with Nicholas Fuentes, who is an unreconstructed Holocaust revisionist neo-Nazi who says that Jews don't belong in Western civilization? Where is Elise Stefanik on that point? Right. Donald Trump was the one who saw very fine people on both sides of an anti-Semitic riot in the Unite the Right festivities called by neo-Nazi groups in Charlottesville in 2017. So if we're going to have a conversation about anti-Semitism, let's talk about real anti-Semitism in the Republican Party today and why Donald Trump, who traffics in anti-Semitic tropes, as he did in 2016 when he ran against Lloyd Blankfein, Janet Yellen, and George Soros, saying that these globalists were not on the side of the American people. Like, when are we going to have the conversation about that?
Yep. Globalists, as you and I know, is code, right? Breitbart uses it. They put a little globe next to it. Globalist means Jewish. The president of the University of Pennsylvania stepped down from her position last night. The board of the board chair stepped down. The pressure has now moved to the presidents of Harvard and ultimately MIT, and we may see their removal or their resignation in the next couple of days. Tell me about your thoughts on this, because I'm always you're a very intellectually consistent guy. How should we be thinking about this?
Well, I'm thinking about it as a father, as a parent. I mean, if my kids have been sent to college at great expense, millions of people across the country, I want to know that if somebody is actually calling for the genocide of the Jews or anybody else on campus, that we've got a college president who will say, quickly get campus police over there. That person could be a danger to other people around them, especially in the age of the AR-15, when we've had, genocidal style language being used, but also massacres taking place, like at the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh or at the Buffalo supermarket. Those are right-wing anti-Semites who talk about the Great Replacement theory. We had a guy at Cornell who was making death threats towards Jews, and we had 3 Palestinian college kids who were shot in Burlington, Vermont, of all places. So, with lax Republican gun laws across the country, we've got to take very seriously anybody who's making any kind of violent threats, especially genocidal threats. Having said that, where does Elise Stefanik get off lecturing anybody about anti-Semitism when she's the hugest supporter of Donald Trump, who traffics in anti-Semitism all the time? She didn't utter a peep of protest when he had Kanye West and Nick Fuentes over for dinner. Nick Fuentes, who doubts whether October 7th even took place because he thinks it was some kind of suspicious propaganda move by the Israelis. And the Republican Party is filled with people who are entangled with anti-Semitism like that, and yet somehow she gets on her high horse and lectures a Jewish college president from MIT.
I'm here today because hate speech has no place on college campuses. Hate speech belongs in Congress, on Elon Musk's Twitter, in private dinners with my donors, and in public speeches by my work husband, Donald Trump.
Having
grown up black and female,
I cannot feel that I require instruction
from you, Congresswoman,
on the evils
of hateful prejudice and violent, threatening rhetoric.
Good night and good luck.